Welcome everybody to another oral history interview in this series of oral history interviews where we're focusing on the Route 66 African American experience centered around Springfield, Missouri and Southwest Missouri. My name is Tom Peters. I'm the Dean of Library Services at Missouri State University. Today's date is Monday, February 23rd, 2015, and our special guest today is Harold McPherson. Harold, thank you.
Thank you.
We're in Harold's home in Lee Summit, Missouri, a suburb of Kansas City. And so, Harold, let me just start with an easy question. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? And if you want to tell us the year you were born as well.
Born in Springfield, Missouri, war baby, 1947. Left there in 1966 and went to Vietnam. Spent a couple of years there and came back to Springfield. And Springfield for me was home from 1947 until I left to go to Vietnam. Then I came back. I was at Missouri State from 65 until I went to Vietnam. And then I came back and went to Missouri State from 69 until 70.
Okay.
There were a lot of problems at Missouri State at that time with the students. And I think it was just a reflection of the entire country during that period of time. Along, the lines of what was going on in the rest of the country. 1969 was pretty wild.
Yeah.
At that time, for me, Springfield was in a big transition from my youth. And when I grew up in Springfield, as I said, it was, it was more defined in terms of where the black populations were. Springfield had probably 5 or 6 black neighborhoods. They were not connected. North, east, south, and in the middle. So they kind of gave African Americans in Springfield a bit of an up on segregation, integration. When people were already in the same neighborhood with these people, they had already interacted with a lot of them. In terms of schools, a lot of us went to Lincoln, which is a completely black school. I went there for the first year, and I think a lot of what I learned as being socialized came from that school.
When you say the first year, was it first grade or?
First grade.
Yeah. No kindergarten back then? Was that?
Kindergarten was my mother. My mother had Lincoln Nursery School.
Okay.
And she had kids from 2 till grade school.
And your mother's name was?
Mary McPherson, Mary Jane McPherson. She had the she ended up with Kiddie Cove daycare, but she started off with the Lincoln Nursery School. And I would say 90% of the African American children of World War II went to her school. They started off there, and most of the kids came out of there that they could read. That was almost a prerequisite. You could tie your shoes, you could tell time, and you could read by the time you got to first grade. That was sort of like the path that a lot of us took or had to take, because of the neighborhood of the nature of our neighborhoods, we were surrounded by a lot of the teachers. You couldn't go to church, you couldn't go anywhere in the neighborhood without being a part of either your mother's teacher or your teacher or somebody that knew them. And so the expectations were always really high. They were placed really high because people knew your family, knew your grandmother. And by knowing those people, they knew what you could do. They knew you couldn't, skate on them and slide through and be a bum. They knew that you had expectations from your family. And I think the teachers, they reinforced the golden rule, and they also enforced, what do you know? And we were like young kids, we were challenged by these ladies, mostly women, at church. And straighten up, square up your shoulders, brush your teeth. And I think that went a long way for kids growing up in a segregated system to be, really socialized and have expectations put on them and ways to get there. I think that was lost when we lost contact with that sort of close feeling with our teachers and our school. For me that was a big change, and I think it had a lot of difference with a lot of other kids.
Growing up, so did you resent segregation or?
I didn't know what it was. Because I lived on Jones Alley between Benton and Washington, and for the first 8 years of my life, the only white people I did see, there was a grocery store, Hunt's Grocery Store on Benton, which was directly across the street from the city hospital, which eventually became Alberta's Hotel on Benton. That neighborhood where I grew up, there were the 4 black churches, there was Pitts Chapel Methodist, there was Gibson Chapel, there was Washington Avenue, and there was the AME Church. Those were like the real parameters of that neighborhood. There was the Four Sisters, I think they called them. But inside that, there were a lot of houses. There were, in the neighborhood I grew up in at that time, there was Graham's Hotel, a motel actually, when the hotel was a motel. They had like the Wishing Well Motel, and they had almost a 24-hour barbecue. And weekends especially, when Fort Leonard Wood was in town, there was a lot of activity. And we heard that in my backyard. I could pretty much hear all kind of adult stuff going on, in my backyard. But that neighborhood had Graham's, it had Alberta's. My mother, when I was really young, at that same house on Jones, worked for the D&B Cab Stand, which was the local black cab company owned by Paul Bartley and Mr. Tom Darton. On the next corner down from me, south of where I lived, there was, the lady's name was, she had a restaurant. Well, it wasn't a restaurant, it was really a grocery store. Susan Cradle. This is Cradle, around the corner of, that would be Jones Alley in Tampa, it'd be on the northeast corner. She had a restaurant. Diagonally across the street from, or directly across the street from there, was the Rock Castle, which was a huge apartment complex. It probably had, I say huge by our standards. And across the street from that was the barber shop. There was another little small restaurant on that same corner. At the end of the viaduct, the Benton Avenue viaduct on Benton and Tampa. There was Charlie Fuller's. He had a restaurant there directly across the street from the church. Next to Charlie Fuller's, there was a garage. Yeah. Those were all the things that I was able to witness the sun go down on. That was the end of the very entrepreneurial era of Springfield black community. Yeah. And that went up until I left that neighborhood in '58. And that was sort of like the beginning of the end of it. I didn't leave the neighborhood because my grandparents lived in Washington. I was there almost every day. But you saw the neighborhood gradually getting taken over. Lester Cox came in there and bought up a lot of the land. And then Drury encroached it from the north side. Right. And so it got squeezed out. Everybody sold their property, and Karshmers took over that whole big section down there. Right. Ford Implements, Lester Cox's big Ford company, corporation, bought up the rest of it. And so what's left of the four churches, everything in between is gone.
Yeah, it's pretty much been leveled, so what do you think contributed to that decline? Well, let's talk about what led to that sort of flowering of black entrepreneurship in Springfield.
Necessity, And I think you can go back further and look at the slave community in Greene County was a lot more diversified than, say, the slaves in Mississippi or Arkansas, Alabama, where you're with 200 other slaves and you're all doing the same thing. You're picking, you're cutting, or you're chopping, or you're hoeing, or you're planting. Whereas when you were in a small farm where there's maybe only 5 or 6 of you, you had to be more diverse. Yeah. And so the skills of the slaves in Southwest Missouri took on that flavor. Yeah. They were animal husbandries. They were able to take care of livestock. They were able to pick up skills like welding. Those are some of the earliest welders around. But the wagon factory was able to hire a lot of those people post-slavery, and a lot of African Americans from the period of the 1860s and so were able to go to work. And those skills, I think, transferred to a lot of unique things. There were bricklayers, there were masons, inventors, and Walter Majors was run out of town, basically. He didn't run out. He left in 1908, like 2 years after the lynching. Yeah. But Majors, he had a newspaper, he had, a business downtown on Jefferson, and his idea of how to run a business ended up revolutionizing an entire hairdressing industry in St. Louis. His advertising, his commercial a way to address marketing, created Poor Old Beauty Supply, which is one of the largest black beauty supplies in the country. She was a millionaire. It gave them a leg up on competition because of his mailing list that he developed. And during the same time, Majors was able to to create 14 or 15 patents that were registered with the Library of Congress. That was Springfield's loss. Springfield lost that sort of talent and genius.
Yeah.
He was born and raised in Springfield, and a lot of men like him, moved on.
They sort of give up after the lynching? Do they say, this is just not the place I want to be?
A lot of them got fed up with it. But I think the story should be told of the ones who stayed. There's this big story about, and Catherine started that, no offense, but many thousand gone. But how about the many thousand that stayed?
Yeah, and I've seen some of the census figures that there really wasn't a big exodus.
The exodus was more to the county. People forget that Greene County had twice as many black people as Springfield did. Yeah. And it didn't start to change the other way until during the Dust Bowl. After the 20s and 30s, little small farms. Because most black people, in slavery, they were called farm workers, or recently after that. But I noticed the census records 10 to 20 years after slavery, they were listed as farmers.
Small farmers.
Farmers. They were not listed as farm hands. They were farmers.
Yeah.
So that represents some real change in how people, looked at themselves and how the government looked at them. They were paying taxes on their land or the crops.
Yeah.
So for me, looking at Springfield from that period, there was a lot of skilled labor. And I think jealousy, there were a lot of poor, underemployed white people.
Yeah.
The Ozarks drew that. Yeah. And historically, those people have blamed black people for taking their jobs and taking their opportunities that they had. Well, I'm not sure if that was the case. Yeah. Because everybody, I knew that grew up in that era was pretty poor. It wasn't like, we're making a lot of money at the expense of these poor white people. That didn't happen. But what I'm saying is that there was a lot of skilled labor. It wasn't all just janitors and dishwashers and people that, servant type of work. There were people who were actually skilled laborers. Yeah. Midwives, so you look at the skill level then and you look at the skill level now. The big change that I see is we went from working for ourselves and the money stayed in the community 3 or 4 times, as opposed to coming from this guy to this guy and gone out of the community. Right. Then there was a sense of community. Men would do work for a lady, she'd fix him dinner. It was almost a barter system. Right. But the fact is there was that kind of skilled labor. Yeah. We had enough teachers to teach all the way from grade school to college. We had a garage, we had a cab stand. We were not as big as, say, Tulsa, the great Wall Street of Tulsa that built up back in the 20s. But I think Springfield, in its own small way, had a lot of independence. Yeah. And when it went from being an entrepreneur to being a laborer, going back to working for somebody else, looking for a job, I think that greatly changed the whole idea of what it was like to be a black person in Springfield. Yeah. Even though black people have always worked for white people, they also had, in that one period of, 100 years or so, a sense of ownership. And the fact that they could pass that on to another generation, their children would benefit from that. I don't see any legacies being passed on today. Yeah. I think the problem with a lot of, not just Kansas City and Springfield, wherever, people aren't living for the next generation. They're pretty much living for tomorrow. Yeah. And the focus has gone from, building a family legacy to just trying to survive. Yeah. And that goes from working for somebody else to working for yourself. You don't have a business or a trade you pass on to your children. My dad worked for the Frisco for 43 years. His dad worked for the Frisco for 47 years. That's 90 years between my dad and his dad worked for the same company. They tried to get me to start right after Vietnam, and I couldn't get that in my head that I needed to settle into that.
Yeah. Well, probably a wise career choice in hindsight.
In the long run, it might have been. I would have been 21 when I first started. 22 actually, if I started back then. But that whole idea that when I was in high school, I got out of high school in Springfield, Missouri, 65. The average high school kid could leave high school and go get an adult job at a factory. And back then that was acceptable work. You could go work for Kraft or Lilly or 3M or we had Dayton Rubber Company out there, Dayco. Yeah. Those are places where I got a job right out of high school. Today, you go to McDonald's and go to work out of high school. You don't get a factory job. Springfield's black community, I think, was kind of spoiled by the ease of getting a job at a factory, and it took away a lot of that, self-determination. Mm-hmm. And I think that's key for, they say adversity brings out the best in people. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that that's the reason why it was easy to get a job. But today, the factories are leaving, and a lot of young kids aren't working, and they can't go out of high school and go get a job. They got to go to college or got to go to trade school. Mm-hmm. And that is completely impacted not only just the black community, but a lot of poor communities, middle class and below, are having a hard time getting enough education to get employed. Yeah. But I think the big problem for me when growing up in Springfield was that there's a lot of unspoken rage. A lot of people had anger, and it just festered. They didn't express it. There was no outlets. Nobody really wanted to hear it. But for me, listening to Springfield's Black history, the advance of African Americans and the demise of the Black African American culture in Springfield started with segregation and integration. And, it may be controversial to say that, but I think it has a key position on what happened to that community after 1964.
Yeah, so the benefits of the impact of desegregation wasn't all positive.
My grandparents both were born and raised in Springfield, and my grandmother back in the 60s when we were, having sit-ins, we'd go to a white restaurant. In fact, with one of the professors at Missouri State, Dr. Cheney, we would go to white restaurants that were supposedly a part of the Public Accommodations Act, and just to see if they were, enforcing it. We would go in ahead of them. We'd be, a couple of us from the NAACP Youth Council, and we would go in and order. 3 of us, African American, we could order chips and fries, burgers and fries, whatever. And then about 5 minutes later, Dr. Cheney would come in and order, and we found out more than once that they changed the menus. They would give us one, and they would give him a completely different menu.
Really?
Different prices.
Higher prices for the black patrons.
Yeah. And we were
really
juniors and seniors in high school. We were trying to test that whole theory is public accommodations really being practiced. Yeah. My grandmother, the first thing she said was, "Why are you kids wanting to go out there and eat? They can't cook. Why do you want to go out to those places? We got good food here, honey. They might spit in your food. You don't want to go out there and make those people. They don't like you anyway." We got that kind of stuff when we were coming, and I think for me growing up in later years, I really understood what she was saying, and I didn't go out to eat it anyway as a kid. It was more of a principle of it. Yeah. It wasn't like I was dying to go into any of those places to eat. Yeah. And I think as youth. We tried a lot of the tactics that we saw nationally. We saw, we didn't have a big groundswell support, a lot of kids. 15 or 20 of us, trying to be activists in the community. I'm sure we didn't make a big dent, but, to ourselves, we were trying to make a difference. Voter registration and, addressing some of the public accommodation issues that were going on in the middle 60s. Yeah. And that was a big change for us because, prior to that, black people couldn't go on vacations.
I was going to ask you about that. Did you travel when you were...
I used to come to Kansas City with my dad because we had a free pass on the Frisco. So we would come to Kansas City.
You'd take the train?
We took the Frisco Railroad to Kansas City. In fact, I got to drive the train into Union Station from out on Lather, so on the west side of town. Yeah. But we came to Kansas City because there was a street hotel up here. And that was the luxury black hotel in Kansas City.
The Street?
The Street Hotel. It's named after a man named Reuben Street. Okay. And it was the Street Hotel. And the bottom of it was the Blue Room. Had a club,
Like a music club?
Yeah, which is today a part of the African American History Museum. Part of the Jazz Museum.
18th and
Vine. That's where the Street Hotel was there. And as I say, at the very bottom of the Street Hotel was the Blue Room. It is now a national museum, and it's part of that jazz museum. Negro Leagues baseball and the jazz are all part of it. But we used to stay at the Street Hotel, and that was when the Monarchs are still playing. This is in the middle 50s, 57, 58. I got a chance to see, Major League Baseball as a kid. Kansas City and saw that. And it wasn't Major League, it was Negro League.
Yeah, was that, what they call that, Municipal Stadium?
Yeah, that was down on Brooklyn.
Yeah.
24th and Brooklyn.
Yeah.
23rd and Brooklyn.
They went to a game there when I was a kid.
Yeah, I got there. And in fact, I got a chance to see Jackie Robinson in St. Louis when I think I was like first or second grade. And that was probably the highlight of my life, seeing that guy. It was an abbreviated game. He got rained out in the fourth or fifth inning, but I saw him pop out. Yeah, okay. He pop out. But that was.
Did you ever take the Frisco up to San Francisco, up to St. Louis?
Yeah. That was how we got there to see Jackie Robinson. I took the Frisco to Memphis, St. Louis, Oklahoma. We went down to Tulsa, I think, that area. My granddad ran from Tulsa to Paris, Texas, and my dad was Springfield to Kansas City. Okay. That was their runs.
Okay.
But yeah, riding the train for us was pretty easy to go.
You ever travel by car?
No, we didn't have a car.
Really?
My dad didn't buy a car until I bought a car from a man up here in Kansas City for $35 and drove that until I went to Vietnam. It was a 1950 Packard. That was way old. But no, my mom and dad, my mother took the bus until she died practically, or it was a cab. Yeah. And my dad, he finally got a car like 1968. He drove until he couldn't drive anymore. He did buy a couple of cars. Yeah. But I didn't have a car until I was like junior in high school.
Yeah. Before then, he took the train if he needed to go.
Yeah, he took the train everywhere. I mean, that was his way of, Springfield and Kansas City. He didn't go anywhere else. Yeah. Came to Springfield, he just go to bed, tired. Yeah.
Now, when you say take the train, was it a passenger train or a freight train?
It was passenger.
Okay.
See, the Frisco ran passenger trains up until about 67, 68, and freight started making so much money for them that they kind of crowded passenger service out. Yeah. They degraded the service. They basically took cars and didn't maintain them very well. They weren't clean. They had to take siding for freight trains. A freight train had priority over passenger. So passenger people were missing their connections because they had to wait 30 minutes for this long freight train to go by. So the railroad devalued the passenger business. But for me, it was a chance to see firsthand how the railroad treated African American men. My dad and my grandfather were both part of a separate union that was the Black Porters Union. It was the Black Trainmen. They had their own separate union, but they had to take the same tests that the white brakemen took. The difference was the African Americans did the same work as the brakemen, such as flagging and signaling and getting out in front of the train and changing tracks and whatever. They had the key for all that. But the African Americans got less money for the same job. African Americans also had to take tickets, help passengers with pillows, get them off and on the train, pick up the mail at each of the stops, and keep the cars swept out.
And the white employees didn't have to do anything.
All they had to do was ride on the train, because in that time, the brakeman rode in the caboose with the fireman, which is absolutely no job. Firemen did not do squat. You don't put coal in a diesel train. So those guys got the chance to hop on the back of the train and ride all the way to Kansas City and not do a thing. Unless maybe every now and then you may be called to flag out the back end of the car or something. Yeah. But the porters were up the front with the actual crew, conductor and the engineer, as well as working the train,
providing services
and such customers. Yeah. That went on until about 1964, 65, when the NAACP got involved, and the Frisco Railroad finally said, "Oh God!" After all these years, my grandfather had been doing the same thing before my dad even got started, and they didn't get anything out of it. So we were promised, families were promised, going to get back pay, going to get equal benefits, vacation. The pay was even different. African Americans were having to make 185 miles to make a day, whereas a brakeman would have to go 165 miles to make a day. And the fact is that they were in different unions, allowed that to be a separate negotiation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and instead of saying, well, why are we taking, this approach when we're all doing the same job? Actually, I'm training most of these guys. When they finally got their seniority back, the black trainmen were now able to take their seniority and bump some of these brakemen who had only been on the job for 10 years. And so my dad was able to do that. He was eventually able to. They took passenger trains off, so he went to being a brakeman on freight. And he was able to use his seniority there and finish out his career as a freight guy, which he hated. He was a passenger guy. He got to dress up, wore cufflinks, and interacted with.
That's what he really liked.
Yeah, he loved that because he was working with people, and he was showing off his skills as a guy that really work with it. He was well respected in that regard, but I think that was what he had to put up with.
Yeah. So let's just talk about the restaurants in the black community, in the 40s and 50s. Elaine Graham Estes told me that they welcomed everybody at Graham's. You could be white, Native American, black, it didn't matter. You were welcome. And they had a walk-up window, carry out. I think they did some deliveries. You could sit down.
I actually, my first job was working for Graham's. My dad and Mr. Graham were good friends. And we rented our little duplex behind Graham's from Mr. Graham. He owned that. Uh-huh. And we, my dad helped Mr. Graham cater. And this was in the 50s, Yeah. And my job was to help load the van that they had. It was a big station wagon, green station wagon. They, take the meat, load it up, coffee, whatever. I was like the gopher guy. And once we got there, my main job was to obviously unload and set it up, but serve coffee, to all the folks. And a couple of times, I went to some real adult functions, a bunch of drunk folks from the Ozarks Jubilee. And I was this little kid, 10 years old, serving coffee to Red Foley and Porter Wagoner and all the good old boys from the Ozarks Jubilee.
Yeah.
And it was fun. I made some money doing that stuff, tips and whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, so you must have been about 55 to 60 or so was when the Ozark Jubilee was active.
And my uncle, Chick Rice, was one of the Philharmonics. So they sang on the Ozark Jubilee. In fact, they backed up Red Foley on Peace in the Valley. I think that was one of his big national hits. Yeah. We had a lot of problems with that as a kid, watching the Ozark Jubilee. The Philharmonics were, the greatest singers on earth to us. And when we first got a chance to, see them on TV, it was the national TV show that was finally, aired. We would wait till like the last minute. They get coming up, the Philharmonics. Well, 2 minutes before the show's over, they finally get them on here. And about the time they really start to get into a song, up comes the credits. And Hallam's Peanut Butter and Sue Bee Honey and all these commercials would roll on, and it would be back in the background. Hear the guy talking over top of their singing. And we did that it was like the most frustrating thing for us. This is like I say, national TV show. And we're thinking, we're going to see these guys. The whole family said, we only had one TV. My grandmother's would go over her and watch it. And it was like, oh, come on.
They were just like the send-off.
Yeah, that was it. And we were frustrated about it.
So they never really got they never got feature time, Now here's the Philharmonics.
Not enough. They did occasionally, but I think most of the time they were relegated to being backup singers. It's hard to be a singer behind somebody you're a better singer than they are. Yeah. And that's what they had to do. They were backing up people who were, quote me on that, they were better singers than. Springfield didn't have any access to, big money for those guys. So they were originally a gospel group, and they had to sing pop music in order to, really make money and be accepted. And they won competitions, national competitions as gospel singers. They were well known. Yeah. But I think families and having a wife and kids took that whole let's travel and go around the country and make some money away from them. They had to take care of their kids, and I think that was the biggest priority most of them took. That it stopped their musical careers from going any further. Yeah.
Did you ever know of any black families or travelers who would come into Springfield, and where would they stay?
They would always ask, where's the colored side of town? Where do black people live? If you see them downtown or something, they were like, man, you're the first black person I've seen all day. Where are the black people? Back then, there were a lot of rooming houses. They're kind of like in Europe, they have pensions, they have bread and breakfast,
Yeah.
you know. Same concept. A lot of people that used them were railroad people. Since Springfield was sort of like the center terminus for the Frisco, they all kind of centered in Springfield.
Yeah.
A lot of railroad men from St. Louis, Kansas City, Memphis, Tulsa, they would come through Springfield. And so there were a lot of rooming houses for people. And I don't know what they paid, $10 a week or whatever. I remember my dad's, he stayed here in Kansas City during that time. It was probably no more than $10 a week.
Yeah.
And when they stayed here in Kansas City, they stayed at the Paseo YMCA.
Yeah.
And all the African American YMCAs were named after a street. And they had dormitory style housing for the railroad guys. They were all, staying in one flat room with beds. But yeah, Springfield had, Graham's, which, Graham's was unique that it brought people there for food. But the travelers, came in and got food as well as I'm not sure if it's 4 cabins, 3 or maybe 4 cabins.
Yeah.
But I remember, way back when stars would come to town, Pearl Bailey, Ray Charles, Globetrotters, they would either stay at Alberta's, which is over on Benton, right across from the youth center, or they would stay at Graham's.
Yeah.
In fact, back in this is probably 1962, when, it's before that, 61, when Richard Nixon was vice president. This is probably in the late 50s. Came to town, and he had black assistants. And the Kentwood Arms on St. Louis Street wouldn't allow them.
Wouldn't let them stay there.
No. So they had to find a room for them at Graham's across town, which is a big controversy, and this guy's working with the vice president of the United States, and you're not going to let him stay in your hotel?
Yeah.
That's how strict it was in those days.
Yeah.
There was a public outcry. The youth council, the NAACP, went down, and I think they picketed the hotel. I don't think anything came of it. This is before public accommodations, obviously, so they did what they wanted to do.
You mentioned that your grandparents lived on what's now called St. Louis Street, which was part of the original Route 66 alignment. So
They out by the Glenstone overpass there in that area. It was my grandmother. Her mother and her grandmother all stayed together, and they lived after her mother remarried. They all stayed together with the man that she married's family. So there was like 2 families and a grandmother all living in the same house.
Yeah.
There's a family in Springfield called the Bedell family, and my grandmother, those 2 ladies, Mrs. Josie and my grandmother, raised their kids together. They would nurse each other's child, and they were that close. But St. Louis Street, I think, I'm almost certain, was named Gold Street back then.
Gold, like the metal?
Yeah, like the metal.
Gold.
And they changed the name of it, I don't know when. I'd have to go look up in the history books when it was actually changed.
But that was late 19th century?
It was like 1910, 1915, 1912, in that era. Mrs. Zelma Graham, reason why I remember that, she said that she remembered my great-grandmother when Mrs. Graham was a little girl then, and she remembers that my grandmother and my great-grandmother all lived around the corner from her. So Mrs. Graham lived, I'm not sure the street that runs out there off of Chestnut. It would be Chestnut Expressway now, but then it was called Chestnut.
Right.
They lived there, and my grandmother lived a block over.
Okay. When you were in high school and when you were at what's now Missouri State University, did you ever go out like on a Saturday night? What would you do for entertainment?
When in high school?
Yeah, and at college when you were.
We'd have house parties.
Yeah.
We'd have our own little parties, or when we got a little smarter, we would go rent a motel and skip out on the bill.
Oh.
That was a big thing for kids back in those days. Have a suite And I think hotels were so naive that they didn't think that you could, you know, steal from us. We're a hotel, you know. So we go out there and get a nice suite and give them a fake name. They didn't ask for driver's license. Just say, you know, Bill Jones from Seattle, Washington, and you know, you check out at 11. Well, we're by 9 o'clock the next morning. We're gone. We're long gone. And we did that for a while. That was one way of partying.
Do you remember any hotels that you did that at?
Yeah, we did that at. I'll think of one. The Lamplighter.
Yeah.
We did out there. I have to think about the rest of them, but yeah, that was, and then we.
The ones kind of on the edge of town, not like Colonial was still around. And,
Never did the Colonial. That was a little bit further out. I mean, we did motels. We didn't go actually to the big hotels and party.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we would have house parties. That was, you know, the youth center was. My mother was also the assistant director of the youth center. That was directly across the street from then Alberta's Hotel, and it was built by the American Legion auxiliary. Not with the auxiliary, it was actually American Legion, African American Norval Stafford. They built it for the youth of the community. A lot of those guys were veterans from World War II, and so it was built, you know, 1952 or 54, around in there. And it was like the center for the black community for a long time. It was the absolute center, the social hub, where they would have plays and choirs coming in from out of town. We had bands come in from Kansas City. There were a lot of classes. There were crafts classes. Every teenager in Springfield, black Springfield, went there on Saturday nights for parties. It was like, you know, we have a I have a jukebox actually.
right.
And it was, you know, the place. Till I was a senior in high school, that was the place for all young black kids to go hang out.
Yeah.
There was a few other places older folks went, you know, but until we got up into close to into college and stuff, we couldn't go to those places. But for our age, that was the center of everything.
There's one out in West Chestnut for the adults.
Yeah, that was the Sunset, or the Sunset Club. Yeah, Sunset.
Yeah.
I know Sunshine, and I think it was the Sunset. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was Riviera
Yeah.
on North Glenstone. You know, Bebop, he had his place on Hampton.
Yeah.
That was Bebop's.
Yeah.
And he rented these other clubs and put them out there. There was always, you know, adult stuff going on. You know, right down Tampa, at the end of I was mentioned earlier about the place called the Rock Castle, which was a apartment complex where a lot of African Americans stayed on Tampa. There was the Key Club at the end of that, and there was also a pool hall there, which is, you know, pretty much a social place.
Yeah.
You know, African Americans pretty much centered their lives around the church back in those days. So the churches did a lot, you know, for, you know, we had church picnics and things like that, where, like, you know, fish fries on Fridays and things like that. That was pretty much, you know, one of the big events in the black community was, you know, stuff centered around the church. But for kids, us, youth, the youth center was the spot.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, any other time, the free spot for us to hang out was Silver Springs Park. And every kid that grew up in my generation spent a lot of time there doing whatever.
So that was the designated park for...
You know, I'll have to pull up the proof of it, but for my studies, Jonathan Fairbanks gave that piece of land to the African American community. Fairbanks owned the land where Votech sits today. Is it still called Votech? That place, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Ozarks Technical College.
Ozarks Technical College. I call it, I'm old. But anyway, Jonathan Fairbanks owned that house where that school sits now.
Yeah.
It used to be Lincoln. It was originally built as Lincoln.
Was it a farm originally or something?
No, Jonathan Fairbanks was the superintendent of the Springfield School District.
Oh.
Yeah, he was one of the first, I think. And he donated that piece of property so the African Americans could build the school. That was the school that was built by Sears. Sears did this whole thing of building schools in the South. This is a foundation, I can't remember the name of it, Rossburg Anyway, they built a school there, and Fairbanks moved his house to Brower, 2 or 3 blocks away. What's significant about Fairbanks' house was he used his house as a sanctuary for African Americans the night of the lynching. A lot of black people went there, and he let them come in, and the story goes he stood out on his front porch and dared or defied the lynch mob from coming in. And during that same period of time, which I digress, the churches were also used as hiding places for blacks the night of the lynching. My grandmother said her and her grandmother and her mother spent 3 nights in the church, waiting on the stuff to kind of simmer down before they felt safe.
So it was multiple days. It wasn't just one night.
It started off that night before Easter, and I think for days after that there was this sort of unrest when the National Guard came to town, and a lot of people were either moving or securing their property or getting. My grandfather said he worked at the lime kiln, which was up on National, where they finally got it covered over now with. James was at
that park.
Yeah, Jordan Creek Park. That used to be a huge hole in the ground, 200-foot hole. Yeah. That was a lime kiln. It goes underneath National, and my grandfather was a teenager then. And he said he worked there, and he said that the night of the lynching, a lot of them were given access to dynamite. The guy who owned it told them they could use dynamite if they needed to defend their property, their houses. I'm not sure if word got back to the lynch mob that the folks over on the other side of the tracks have dynamite, but I remember there was my grandfather for one, and his cousin said that they walked. They had little squirrel guns, and they were kind of like, that was their means of defense. Yeah. They didn't have a lot of stuff, and they said if the dynamite would have been something they would have used, they would probably used it. Yeah. And that was 1906. And as I said earlier, those people who stayed are not being mentioned as much as those who left. Yeah. And I think it took a lot of courage to stay there in spite of what was going on around them. 3 or 4 years before that, they had completely wiped out Pierce City. Every black person in town was sent either to Springfield or Joplin or somewhere else.
Just random.
So a lot of those people, they dug in and didn't leave. So I think it says a lot about what survived in Springfield. How many people that didn't leave, and what did they do, and how did they survive? Yeah. Adaptation, creativity, keeping your head down. I don't know. They survived, and they were able to raise families, and that was the very important part of me being here.
And then the Tulsa Troubles were the 22?
21, yeah. Did
you ever hear about that when you were growing up?
No, my dad. They talked about it, My dad was born in Muskogee, so he would have been like 6 when that happened. Muskogee's like 30 minutes from Tulsa. Yeah. And then there's a lady who lived down the street from us. She was a pretty good sized child when that happened. Yeah. We knew some people from that area, but I didn't hear a lot of talk about it until years later about the real details of it. And it's kind of like the same story of the lynching in Springfield. A lot of people who lived there through that whole period didn't talk about it a lot. It wasn't like it was common everyday knowledge that these men got lynched. I happened to be around some people who told me about it. My grandparents. They said, yeah, that was what happened here. The whole idea that Springfield's black community survived says a lot about either people adapting, keeping their mouth shut, or what kept it that way. I don't know. Yeah. Because I think in a lot of other cities there would have been a lot more violence. Yeah. Amongst back and forth actually. Yeah.
Well, you served in Vietnam, and today they're a trading partner. Just like
I came back from Vietnam, and I was just absolutely disgusted with America. I had just absolute rage. Came back to Springfield and went to Missouri State and discovered that they were putting bad things in documents. They were saying things like, she dates black men on young girls' transcripts. We were asking for some curriculum changes. We were looking for maybe a couple advisors, give us a black person in the administration, give us a teacher, give us a subject that we can study that's not European history. Those were the things we were asking for in 1968, 69. And it turned into a bit of a riot on the part of whoever was involved in this whole mess. The students down there, the white students, said we were going to do some stuff that we had no power to do. They said, oh yeah, they're going to have a panty raid on the girls' dorms. And it was like 3 black guys sitting out in front of the student union listening to a baseball game. And all of a sudden there was like 500 frat rats standing around threatening these guys, Yeah. So things went south down there. There was a lot of unity amongst the anti-war movement and the African Americans of the community. At Central High School, at the same time, there was a lot of racial tension about Confederate flags being waved. Drury College had some similar issues over there. So SMS, Drury, and Central High School decided, let's meet on the square and talk about this. Let's have a town meeting. Let's pull everybody we can, shut down the square for an hour, and get some attention brought to what's happening in these schools. It disintegrated from there. It got to the point where we did actually get to the square. We had a nice meeting. Folks left there refreshed, energized, feeling like they got their story told. And we're going to go out to the university and talk to Dr. Mallory and have him meet with us. We tried that earlier. It didn't work. We were going to try to have a off-site meeting where the university and select students could get together and discuss the issues that we were having with the university. We had a campus sit-in. We walked up in and sat and occupied the administration building. There was just all sorts of innuendo floating around this event in 1960. It was the spring of 68, or excuse me, 69.
Spring of 69.
Yeah, spring of 69. And for me, I was fighting rage at that time because Vietnam had just poisoned my brain. For me, Springfield was starting to really lose its attraction. I'm thinking, I'm not back here for this. I got a life to live. I moved. I moved to California the very next year.
Yeah.
And as soon as I got there, I felt like I was at home.
Yeah.
I ran into people who were thinking along the same lines I was about.
You moved to San Francisco?
I moved there in '72. Yeah.
Oh.
I lived there and went to San Francisco State for a year and a half, and then went to City College for a couple of years. So for me, going out there put me in touch with the international consciousness that I didn't have in Springfield. When you're now in touch with people who are looking at things globally as opposed to regionally or neighborhood to neighborhood, you have a different perspective on how things can progress and how you fit in. And I think that was good for me to be able to see myself and how I fit into the big picture. Ended up going to Africa and spending some time over there.
Oh, you did?
And being able to, get in touch with the consciousness of the African diaspora through the 70s. And that was a big way that I think I was influenced through music, through a lot of things. But back to Springfield.
Before we get back to Springfield, so we interviewed Father Moses Berry, and you went out to San Francisco and California. He told me he and a buddy hitchhiked up to St. Louis on 66. So they thought they'd have a better chance of getting a ride all the way up to the coast from St. Louis than from Springfield. And then basically hitchhiked out to California. So how did you get out to California back
First time I went out there, a guy named Jim Murphy and myself, he had a little Volkswagen, and I had about a 9-month-old German Shepherd. And we went some people out there, and we just headed out there.
Yeah. Do you remember which route you took out to California?
Yeah, well, actually, we took 40 because we had some friends we wanted to see in San Diego. We stopped in San Diego, and then we took 101 pretty much all the way to San Francisco. And then from there, we ended up going to a place where I had some more friends, a place called Happy Camp, which is about 20 minutes from the Oregon-California border.
Happy Camp?
Happy Camp, California, on the Klamath River, Bigfoot country.
That's the name of the town, Happy Camp?
Yeah, Happy Camp. It's a logging community. A lot of trees and stuff up in that area.
Yeah.
Salmon fishing, trees.
Yeah.
I went and worked for the Forest Service. That was my escape from thinking about Vietnam and war. I just got lost in the wilderness and planted trees and did whatever I could do in the woods. I enjoyed it for about a year, so I could kind of clear my head out and figure out which direction I wanted to take.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So back to Springfield. You ever hear about a publication called the Green Book?
No.
It was a guy named Green. I think he was based out of New York City. It was sort of like a traveler's aid for black travelers. So it'd tell you, if you come into Springfield, you want a meal, go to Alberta's or Graham's. If you need a place to sleep, and even had hairdressers and barbers. And
I've got a couple of city directories. They were Springfield city directories with all the black people in them, and it was
like in a separate section would they list?
Yeah, it was. I've got the copies of it here. It had Springfield and Joplin black businesses and residential addresses, and it had a list of the white places that would employ black people or places that would allow black people to eat there. Or whatever.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I guess this Green Book was sort of like
30s. This is 1936, 37.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that. It may be in the same
kind of thing but it was just designed for the black traveler. So
once you left Springfield going west, if you're driving, there's no place to go.
Yeah.
You're not going to go to Oklahoma and stop. Them people down there, that's not a good place. I mean, separate. When I grew up, Oklahoma still had separate colored and white drinking fountains. Yeah. And signs that were just inflammatory.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So you had to go all the way to California before you could find a place to sleep. I mean, you'd have to sleep on the side of the road.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no black houses or black businesses in Kansas out that way, or Oklahoma or Mexico, New Mexico. There's just no place. So black people really didn't do a lot of traveling. My grandparents, my grandmother and grandfather, my grandmother never left Illinois is as far as she ever been. To see her daughter in Galesburg, Illinois, and in Veneta, Oklahoma, to the south.
Veneta, yeah.
She'd never been anywhere other than that. My mother, she'd never been to the ocean. She'd never seen the ocean. She died never seeing either ocean.
Yeah.
People didn't travel that much.
Yeah.
Neither of my grandmothers drove. They never drove a car. Never learned how to drive. My mother never learned how to drive a car. It's like people back then were in a whole different frame of mind. Women today are a lot more independent. Women, my grandmother worked in the house. Mm-hmm. She didn't work. She couldn't work for white people because they made her angry. Mm. She refused. She said, I'm not going back to work for them. They treat me wrong. I'm not going to work for them. And she said that when she was a teenager. So she was a cook and a homemaker, and she raised her family there, and that was her. My dad's mother, she never worked. They were housewives. Yeah. My mother was one of the first generation of women in my family to work, and the fact that she was a daycare provider at the Lincoln Nursery School gave a lot of women after post-World War II the ability to go get a job because it had somebody to watch their kids for them. Mm-hmm. And there was a big population of kids from 1940 whatever into the 50s.
Yeah, part of the baby boom.
And so, she gave a service that was cheap and provided good food and secure place for training and socialization for kids.
Yeah. Was that her own business or was it?
No, she was, it was a board of people. I'm not sure who were all on it today. I could probably think of a few. Mr. Grimm was on the board, I believe. Mm-hmm. Maybe a couple of the teachers in Springfield. But my mother was hired pretty much, they didn't have a real background. She had never done that kind of work before. She worked with the Girl Scouts. She ran an elevator downtown, but she never really had a real job as a teacher. So she started teaching when I was like 2, I think 1949, 1950. She became the teacher there, created the curriculum. And it ran until 1958, 59 or so. And then she took over, she was assistant director at the Springfield Youth Center on Benton. And that was after the nursery school closed, Lincoln Nursery School closed. Then the youth center became her focus. And she was not only working with kindergartners, she was now able to work with teenagers and senior citizens and all people in the community. And that was a much broader scope for her. But she really liked working with kids. So eventually she came back to teaching kids. She went to Head Start for a couple of years. She was a teacher in Head Start. And then about 1970 or so, the people who she taught in Lincoln Nursery School got together and said, we need you to come teach our kids. So she had a whole other generation of kids from about 1970 until she died in 89. She had those kids at what is now called Kiddie Cove over on Calhoun, right off of Sherman Street. She had, I don't know how many kids, average probably 30, 40.
Was that her own business?
No, she was the director and teacher and chief cook and bottle washer. But no, she did not own any of that. She was just hired by the community. They liked her. They thought, well, you did such a great job with our kids. Bring them. Let's get some of these younger kids. She's had, I would say, 3 generations of kids that have come through her schools. And sadly to say, she's one of the last ones to do that. I don't know if any others are able to put that sort of program together. It was, it was all inclusive for the black community. It was like, that was the school you went to.
You mentioned the Ozark Jubilee. I mean, what did you make of that? Was that, it originated in Springfield. It was nationally broadcast.
Yeah.
Was that a point of pride, or was like?
I didn't have any. I mean, the fact is that my uncle was a part of the Philharmonics, and that they sang on the Ozark Jubilee was my connection. I'm not, and never have been a fan of that kind of music. We felt kind of sorry for them because they had to sing songs that probably they weren't more comfortable singing. These were gospel singers, who could sing the blues, they could sing R&B, they could sing gospel, they could sing a lot, they had dance steps, they changed costumes 2 or 3 times a night. These guys had skills and talents way beyond the people they were backing up. I say this again, these guys could perform. But the Ozark Jubilee gave them a national audience, but we felt, it was demeaning to these guys, to their real talent, to show how they really were, how good they really were. And that was a disappointment for me, and seeing the show the way I said earlier, but we wait on for an hour to watch these guys, and then the credits roll, and they get them up there singing, and so and that's over. Oh, guys, we didn't get to see the end of it. We saw them at church, they rehearsed in my grandmother's yard, in her living room a lot. They formed as a choir, as a quartet at Gibson Chapel Presbyterian Church, and that was their roots. They were gospel singers from the word go. And like I said, because of, things were going around, they had to adapt and change and learn other styles of music.
Did you ever hear them live? Did you ever go here at Ozark Jubilee?
Oh, yeah.
You go live?
Yeah. The Shrine Mosque. We saw them at the Shrine Mosque. Brenda Lee was in fact, they backed her up for a while. We saw them at church more than anything. I saw them live at church, which is where I was spoiled. See them walking down the aisles and have people, passing out because these brothers could bring it. That's where I saw them most, and I saw them at the Ozark Jubilee places. I was like, I love these brothers, but why do they make them sing these songs? They're backing up these folks. I mean, every night you get some of the real essence of who they were. You couldn't keep it down. You couldn't suppress it because they came through no matter how they sang, no matter what kind of music they sang. Their harmony was still so strong that you couldn't deny what they were.
Did you when you were growing up, did you ever have a sense that 66 was a major highway coming through town, and that it was kind of a big deal?
Yeah. I understood it. The fact is that when you got on the highway, I mean, there's only one way to get in and out of town back in those days. 13 Highway was not much wider than this room. Had bank curbs on it. I mean, it wasn't a safe highway. It was like, old bloody as they call it, 13 back then. And the other highways didn't go anywhere. 60, where am I going 60 highway? 160, I don't go where I need to go. So 66, as they say, the connection to St. Louis was always, that's big time, And if you're going the other direction, well, Tulsa or Oklahoma City or California, if you can make that far. So we always had the idea that this part of Springfield represented, a lot, you know. And you know, the businesses that the black community that I grew up in were just off the main path.
Yeah, was that sort of by design that, you know, was there kind of an unwritten rule, or maybe a written rule, that if you were a black business owner, you really couldn't have it on Main Street or Route 66 or Glenstone
there's Hardricks. They were on St. Louis Street, and they were.
What kind of business was that?
It was a mercantile grocery. They sold to white grocers.
Oh.
They were big.
Okay.
They were the mercantile guy. They were the big guy who sold to the little guy.
They were the wholesaler.
Yeah. So they were on St. Louis Street. The only Hardricks I remember was Mrs. Hardrick. She was one of them's wife. Bert Hardrick, I think, was her husband. She had a small grocery store on Sherman, directly across the street from Lincoln High School. And my dad, his mom and dad lived right next door. So I had a chance to go into Hardrick's, not the original Hardrick's, but the remnants of Hardrick's grocers. And they, you know, I have a lot of memories going in there and getting stuff from her. Right down the street from there was Kermit O'Neill. He had a sandwich shop. And across the street from there, Chick Rice and his wife, Jeanette, my uncle, they owned a little grocery store off of Sherman Street in Brower. So there were some black businesses over there, not just centered over off of the old neighborhood where I grew up. But
right.
There was some.
It's kind of a black neighborhood. There was a bakery over there that was just torn down, but I've heard that just south of St. Louis, there was another kind of black neighborhood there.
They called it East End.
Yeah.
That was called East End. That would be Hampton, McDaniel Street.
Yeah.
McDaniel, where there was a church called Mount Eagle.
Mm-hmm.
Mount Eagle was a small little black church right there off of Hampton and McDaniel, torn down for the John Q. Hammond's complex that they put up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a little small black neighborhood. The blacks lived on all up and down McDaniel and Hampton. Not sure of all. I know there was probably some more houses over there. I don't remember.
Yeah.
McAllister, I think there was a couple of black houses over there. But that neighborhood kind of isolated from the rest of the black community, surrounded by very wealthy homes on Walnut Cherry, very, you know, those houses traditionally had little small houses in the back where the slaves or the workers worked.
Yeah.
My aunt and great grandmother, they lived up. They worked and lived up on Walnut Street, and that neighborhood kind of ran over towards the east, where there was another small black neighborhood off of Traffic Way. There was Terrell Phelps used to be there. Used to be now it's like the American Legion.
Yeah.
Legion home right there. Be directly behind where Sears used to be, or the convention center.
Right.
That little area off of Chestnut to the north was black.
It was black.
Yeah,
Okay.
that had 3 or 4 blocks of black families.
Yeah.
The north side of Springfield, there was what we call the north side. That would be North Washington, Dale Street, Atlantic, all those streets. And there was a black church over there. All the black neighborhoods, every last one of them, there was a black church.
Yeah. A black church, some businesses.
Small businesses. Some of them didn't have. I don't say they all didn't. I don't remember all of them. I know that, you know, east of those black churches, on the west side of town, there was Reedy Chapel. That was a black neighborhood off of Broadway on the west side. They would call that Westport. But each of the black neighborhoods had their own identity. As I said, each one had their little church. And we all kind of met in the middle, you know. I mean, the businesses were all there, and of course the youth center was kind of like the center meeting place for all the kids from all those neighborhoods in the west and the north. We'd all meet.
Did you identify with the neighborhood? Like you knew, these are kids from my neighborhood. And the other kids are from these other neighborhoods.
And we got older, we had competition, sports, baseball against these, or football. And thanks to Turkey Bowl, we played guys in West Side and whatever. It was known, you know. Competition was, you know, unspoken. You know, this is. I'm sticking up for my guy. This is my neighborhood.
But generally friendly.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the big battles in my youth coming up were not amongst each other. It was amongst us in Joplin. African American community of Joplin and the African American community of Springfield got riotous at times. I mean, bringing out police dogs and
competitive.
No, fighting over girls.
Yeah.
Not competing over sports, fighting over girls.
Huh?
Yeah, you go to Joplin, you mess with one of their girls, they run you back up 40 Highway.
Yeah.
Or 44 Highway, 66 Highway.
Yeah, yeah.
That was, our drive from Springfield down Route 66 to Joplin.
To Joplin. So
you go to Joplin.
Do you like on
Joplin.
a Friday night or something? Or
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Will they have a football game? Or what sort of brought you over there?
Well, later years there was football, but even without the football, there was just connection between Joplin and Springfield.
It was like,
It had nothing to do with football.
If you were a guy, it was like, well, there's girls over there.
Yeah, and they were not from Springfield. They're new girls.
We don't know.
And the guys from Joplin the same way. They come to Springfield and say, "Oh, buddy, there's some new girls in Springfield. I like that." So I mean, they're close enough to be, competitive in the sense of not sports as much as just girls.
Yeah.
I can remember. I mean, literally, the Springfield Police Department being brought to the youth center with dogs and.
Really?
The whole, to shut down Benton
There
Street.
was, yeah.
Oh, yeah, fights, people get knocked out, cars get windows smashed and stuff.
Yeah.
We go to Joplin. I talked to a girl years ago, and she said, "Are you from Springfield?" I said, "Yeah, I'm from Springfield." My brother would come down there in Springfield. He'd come up there. He'd be all dressed up, looking all good. He'd come in about, leave about 9. Where you going out there? I'm going to Springfield, party up there. So he come back about 11, 12 o'clock, Cove's all ripped up. He'd been to Springfield. So that was all in the middle 60s, 62, 3, 4, 5, on through there. Yeah, and then the football, it did kind of carry over. We played Joplin football, I think my junior year. And we beat them pretty bad. We had really destroyed them. And it wasn't a black-white thing. It was just Joplin and Springfield, Central High School, Springfield.
Yeah.
And literally, we needed a police escort. They were, throwing bricks at the bus, and they're trying to knock the windows open, and it was pretty crazy. But yeah,
was the black community in Joplin bigger than the black communities?
No. It's close, but not as big. I mean, Springfield's black population is probably in Southwest Missouri the largest, followed probably by Joplin. And it's amazing that years ago, all of the Southwest Missouri, all the small towns had black families. Ozarks, Missouri had some black families.
Ash Grove,
Lebanon.
For a while, Ash Grove had like a third of their population was black.
Ash Grove, Cave Springs, Lebanon, Marshfield.
Yeah. All had a few black families at least.
Every one of them.
Yeah.
And most ended up in Springfield in those areas. A lot of them because it's just no jobs. And Grandpa died, and he sold the farm, and so the kids moved to Springfield, moved to town. There was a lot of integration in Springfield prior to integration. And I'm not sure how integrated it was, but there were several schools out in the county where black kids went. They were white schools. Ebenezer, Oak Grove, Shady Dell. This is back in the 30s and 40s where black kids went to those schools. And those were all, they had their own school.
Kind of necessity.
They didn't have anything else. Black kids, a lot of them did go to Lincoln, for high school, but for grade school, they didn't come all the way in.
Yeah.
For like in Ash Grove and Cave Springs, those kids, Willard I think even, they went to like 5th or 6th grade, and if they wanted to go to high school, they had to get a bus or find some cousins or somebody in Springfield, to get from Ash Grove to Springfield. I don't know if there's a bus or what, but I know that in order to get a high school education, you had to come to Springfield. It was the only high school around. But
so it was sort of semi-integrated. It was integrated through like grade 6, but then
but then there were no high schools.
Yeah,
Black kids didn't go to the high school.
If you were black, you weren't welcome at.
I don't know the rule, but I know that there were black families that went to Ebenezer, the Duncan family, not Duncan, the Pike family went out there. There's the old Hickory Hills School District out there. Those are individual school districts. Shady Dell, Hickory Hills were part of Springfield, but they were their own districts. There was Sunshine School out on the west side. There were a lot of black families sent their kids to. This is in the 30s. So I know that the integration technically happened way before. But I've also been told that a lot of those black kids went to school in the evenings after the white kids got out, and they got the teachers and got what curriculum they got. But I don't know if there was like a bunch of kids sitting in the same classroom together, black and white together. I haven't heard that, but I do know they went to those schools. You know, the fact that Springfield schools were able to integrate as fast as they did is a tribute to the fact that blacks in Springfield had pretty much, you know, understood how to survive in white society in Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah.
Their parents did it.
Yeah.
So the kids were, you know, like, okay, this is what they are. Yeah. And in a lot of cases, a lot of the neighborhoods, there's no just all black. You know, there were black kids, and they lived down the street from some white kids. Maybe some white kids across the street. Yeah. It wasn't just, you know, like Pruitt-Igoe projects in St. Louis or where in Kansas City, where you got a dense population of all blacks for like miles and miles.
Yeah.
Springfield was always, it was scattered around.
Yeah.
And there was integration going on throughout.
Yeah. Did you ever have any white friends when you were in high school?
You know, high school friends that I pretty much knew were from sports.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably the big equalizer for young black men in Springfield coming up. There was finally an equal playing ground, a level playing ground, where we could actually go out there and get respect in sports. And I've met lifelong friends through sports because, you know, that whole colored white thing is no longer is valid now. If you're helping us win some games,
That's right.
you know,
if you're good,
you're good. You're the guy, man. And you get respect that way. And I think that was one way that it kind of broke down the barriers. Is that, you know, to this day I still talk to people who are older than myself. Go, well, did you know Bebo Looney? Do you know this? Yeah, those guys are a few years older than me, a couple of years older, but there's this memory, the collective memory of young blacks coming up in Springfield, and depending on the generation, I think that was one of the big things that were able to break down some of the barriers. Yeah. You know, jobs, of course, but you know, for the most part, jobs were not integrated. Yeah. You know, blacks did black work and white folks did what they did. You know,
hey, you mentioned that your mom was an elevator operator?
Yeah, down at Neff's. Neff Peterson's, I think it was. It was a department store, women's clothing store.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she just ran an elevator. Just, customers on and off.
Yeah, I remember that.
Downtown had a lot of those elevators.
Yeah.
You know, and that, as well as they had the vacuum bill. You could put the little thing in it, scoops it up to the second floor.
I remember those from my youth too.
Yeah.
I thought that was the coolest thing. You know?
Yeah, that was magic, man. That was magic stuff. But yeah, Springfield then was a lot slower than it is now, and the fact is the idea of downtown was a real downtown. Yeah. You know, everything's centered around, you know, St. Louis and Jefferson and Kimbrough, and that was the heart of Springfield until all of a sudden the 70s came along, we built malls and de-emphasized it, you know. And I think when a lot of the old timers were upset when they made traffic one way around the square. Oh gosh, that was the worst thing that could ever happen. The square itself always had a lot of mystery to the black community because of the lynching. And my grandmother told me there was a woman who predicted that square would burn down every so many years because of the things that had been done there. That square has burned down before, and this is not the original square. It's burned down 2 or 3 times. Yeah. In the last 100 or so years. Yeah. But it always had that sort of, you know, innuendo when people talked to me anyway.
You were always on kind of high alert when you were on the square.
Not really. I mean, I didn't think about getting lynched or anything, but you know, because I was one of the kind of kids that was adventurous enough to walk into a place and not even recognize that I wasn't supposed to be there. Yeah. You know, I mean, when we were, you know, in junior high school, we're not supposed to go and sit down at a lunch counter. But I remember going in many times and ordering, and I didn't think that I was not supposed to. You went in there and ordered? So yeah, I sat down and ordered. You know, but I guess a kid, you know, junior high, it wasn't as threatening as a bunch of grown men. And I was usually sometimes by myself. But I shopped at hers. You know, they had the best record collection of any place you could buy records. You know, I used to go up on the mezzanine, and they had this huge The vinyls, it was just huge everywhere. So I
They have like listening booths you could listen beforehand.
Yeah, they might have.
Or just the headphones you could listen to before you bought it.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about blacks and whites, but what about? Do you have any memories of Asian Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans?
None. Springfield's African American community had no affiliations that I'm aware of any other group other than white people. Because Springfield is 99% white, even when I was a kid,
Yeah.
And the Chinese didn't really come there until later when they started opening up the, Leong's Tea House and all the good restaurants, and that became a part of the black community because black people really like cashew chicken. It's one of the things black people like. Oh, it tastes good. I like the chicken. So that was not a part of growing up. I mean, in high school, I don't remember any Oriental kids or Native American kids. No, a lot of black people claim to have Native American ancestry, and a lot of them do. My family, owned property, Cherokee Nation, right there in Tahlequah, right outside of Muskogee. And some of my cousins, my dad's cousins, received some money for being a 16th Cherokee or something. There's, a lot of black families have said that, I was never proud of it. I really figured out that, no, they were slaves to the Cherokee. The Cherokee weren't good people. The Cherokee made slaves out of my great-grandparents, So I don't know. I looked at that as pig in the poke.
Yeah, but you weren't aware of other...
No. Culturally speaking, Springfield is pretty much white.
Yeah.
And black culture is there, not nearly as strong as it was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's evident. I mean, anybody that's ever lived there would say that. Yeah. And even there, it was tenuous at best.
Yeah.
I mean, it was alive, thriving as best it could, but I mean, it was on just a very shaky ground. Black people couldn't get loans. I mean, the absolute tragedy of farmers, black farmers in Springfield. There were a lot of black farmers outside in the county. A lot of black farmers. And they couldn't get loans. Couldn't go to the bank and get money to plant or
a crop.
Whatever, put a crop. And so that was and still is one of the biggest issues in America, is that the money owed black farmers for many, many years of not being able to get a loan.
Yeah.
Just a signature loan on anything.
Yeah.
Missouri's farmers, I think, are there 10 black farmers in Missouri? I know of one.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I'm an urban farmer. I'm talking about one guy who actually has a couple hundred acres. He's 93, and he sold all his cows. He's selling rabbits now, but there's just not that many of them left.
Yeah.
And that was from the 30s when blacks were farmers to today, where I don't think there are any black farmers in Southwest Missouri. There could be one or two, but I don't know.
I don't know of any, but...
Tolliver's had a big farm out on the southwest part of Springfield, across from Springday, Dayton Rubber Company.
I actually think Alberta had some kind of a farm out west of town.
She did. Her son, her grandson is an historian. He's in St. Louis. He wrote an article about Alberta's place out on 66 Highway. She had a restaurant out there.
What's his name?
His name is Irving Logan.
Oh,
Erving Logan.
Yeah.
I don't have his number.
No, I've heard of his name as we've been working on this series.
Yeah, so. Irving Logan's mother,
Cricket
Logan. She's as big a historian as anybody I know in Springfield.
Yeah, we've interviewed
especially about her. Have you talked to her?
I didn't do the interview, but we have interviewed her.
Okay, and she's very knowledgeable. Very knowledgeable woman.
Yeah.
I've listened to her, read some of her stuff, and Irving, her son, and I've exchanged a lot of information over the years about black history.
So he wrote an article about farm.
Who did?
Irving, did he write an article about it?
It wasn't about farming, it was about her restaurant, and I can't remember the name of it. He sent me a copy of it years ago, and I probably do have it around.
I'll contact him.
But yeah, he could give you actually what he wrote there. It's a great article. It's great, well written.
Yeah.
I've written several things for Ozark. What's the name of Samuel Knox's paper?
Oh yeah, the flew out of my head. I know what you're talking about. His paper.
I published a couple of articles in his paper. One was in particular about African Americans and the significance of August the 4th, which, if you look at most histories of black people in Missouri, or not just Missouri, but all over the country, there's this reference point of Juneteenth in June, where the slaves were set free in Texas. But that doesn't necessarily mean the other states had the same information. The information was passed by mule or foot. And Missouri was not a slave state. It fought on the side of the Union, even though it was a slave state. It declared it was. But Missouri never fought on the side of the Confederacy. So it was considered a Union army that ran the state. And so the slaves, when the Emancipation Proclamation was read, it set free the slaves in the quote-unquote slave states. Missouri and Kentucky and a few other states that were not officially considered free. So African Americans in Missouri, and a lot of places in Missouri, celebrate August the 4th as Emancipation Day. And you can look at the history of Springfield, Joplin, Carthage, Boonville, Missouri, Fayette, Missouri. August the 4th is a key day for African American emancipation.
So that's when they sort of ruled that, even these states that did not secede, that were slave states, those slaves are free as well.
Yeah. Now, I don't know when they found out about it, but that day is real significant in history.
Yeah.
The Creek Nation, also a nation that had many African American slaves, that was their Independence Day, August the 4th. So for years, Springfield blacks have celebrated that Park Day celebration, but it was misinformed to a lot of people that they thought it originated with events in the park around 1950, when people began to come back home and celebrate, Black homecoming, and August the 4th just happened to be that day. It was like, I didn't buy that. I thought, there's got to be more than just August the 4th. So I basically have researched it, and it's an emancipation. It's not about a park day. And if you look at the park itself, the park goes back to slavery. Park Day in that park, Silver Springs Park was the first place that slaves were able to go out and squat on some land. There was a creek, there was a big spring there, big as this room, a huge, cold, deep spring that people could wash their clothes in. They could go, the church, years later up at Timlin's Temple, they come down there and have baptisms.
Yeah, they're trying to save that temple.
I've heard they've got all but about 10,000.
Yeah, they're pretty close.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
But that park itself has a very spiritual, historic connection to the black community. And that reason that I'm saying is because people were baptized in the water there, and the families that were first set free, I've been reading and heard that they were just little dugouts built into the creek banks there until people could actually find a place to live, so they could actually get up on their feet. Springfield's history obviously was written without black people in mind. You can read about the Fulbrights, you can read about the Campbells, you can read about all those families that came here, but each one of them had about 7 or 8 slaves and more. And that's what I say, back to the very beginning of me studying the history of Springfield, I studied the history of my family and discovered that they helped build the thing. Both my great-grandfathers on my mother's side, her father's grandfather and her mother's grandfather, were escaped slaves from the plantations, ended up in St. Louis and volunteered with the 67th Colored Volunteer Infantry. And that unit that they both served in, I don't think they even knew each other, but that unit ended up donating their salaries, the last several salaries, to build Lincoln University. And that story doesn't get told in Springfield about the liberators who went out and fought for their country, and at the same time, African Americans died in the Civil War at a horrible rate, not from the war, but from disease, from bivouacking in swamps and not being treated medically and whatever. But that is a story that I'd love to be able to expand on, and it's something that a lot of people don't know about the history of Springfield.
There's a history professor down in Springfield, Steve McIntyre, who just a couple of years ago came out with a book of contributed chapters about the history of Springfield. Majors is in there. There's a chapter on his work, and so. Well, we've been speaking with Harold McPherson. Thanks very much for sharing your knowledge and your perspective on the history of Springfield. And we've been kind of focusing a little bit on, the Route 66 era.
Route 66, there's songs about it, and, the bands I play in, I'm a musician too. One of the songs is probably the most overplayed two songs that we get requested to play are Route 66 and Going to Kansas City. Oh, how many times do we get asked to play those two songs?
Okay. Well, we'll end there. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you.
It's been good.
Been
informative.
Well, I ramble a lot because it's hard to focus on one period of my life because it's all a blur at this point. It's moving so fast. I'm going through the time and looking at my early youth in Springfield and the way I see Springfield today. I'm sad.
Yeah.
I'm sad. And a lot of people in my age group are in the same way. Most of us, my generation of kids that left there, one of the kids who died, he's a year or two younger than me, but he's the head of the energy state of California, San Diego. He's on the board of directors of the San Diego Padres. He's on he's an international business guy. He was head of the San Francisco Chronicle newspaper. He was an advertising director. Another lady I graduated with is a minister and a lawyer. There's another lady, she's the head of Edison Schools. Another kid I graduated from was the head of the Michigan penal system. Mm-hmm. Those are all Springfield's losses. Those are people who couldn't make it in Springfield or didn't want to try to fight the battle and went elsewhere and became wealthy.
Yeah, got a
very successful,
good upbringing, good education.
Springfield gave us all good. I think any kid who went through the 50s in Springfield and came up through that educational system and learned about themselves a little bit, were better people. And today, I think, looking back, I don't see that come across. I don't see young kids in touch with anything, with their past or the future. There's a few down there really trying to hold it together and keep it focused like that.
Yeah.
But I think the big difference for a lot of us was our grandparents all knew each other, and they were all third and fourth generation Springfieldians. So that forges a bond that you don't get from, we've been here 20 years, we've been here 10 years.
Right.
So, when you grow up and your best friends, your grandmothers were also best friends.
Right.
It's a different way of being.
Yeah, like you say, you didn't you saw your teacher in church and you saw her
they
on the street,
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mother's teachers. Mrs. Ada Fulbright was my mother's second grade teacher. Mrs. Zelma Graham was my mother's first grade teacher.
Yeah.
So when you're around those people, you're a soldier, man. You lock it up. And I think that was what really was the big input for me, is that I was able to be put on the right track, and if I ever deviated for a second, I was like, you better get back over there. And your mom and dad would know about it before you got home.
Right.
So I think we weren't given the option to fail. We really weren't. Mm-hmm. And I think the fact is that our parents understood the need for education, which is what I was saying about my great-great-grandfathers. Before they mustered out of the military, they were required to learn how to write and read when they got out of the Civil War. And they were intelligent enough to know that education was the key out of the mess they just come through. They were all slaves. And they knew that in spite of all the stuff that the white people had tried to do to them, education was a criminal act for black people.
Yeah.
It was you go to jail, you get killed for learning how to read, to teaching somebody else how to read.
Yeah.
So for the fact that these ex-slaves were able to write their names and read, and instead of putting an X on the thing, they were all given a raise, not raise, but a promotion from private to corporal. So if you came in as a private and you could learn how to write and read, you go out as a corporal.
Yeah.
And, so,
and as you said, they saw the value that they put their money where their mouths were, and then
education
helped fund Lincoln University.
Education in post-Civil War was huge because, as I said earlier, you had a working class of black people who were skilled laborers, and for them to go to school and go to college, back then, Wilberforce in Ohio, Lincoln University, were schools that a lot of the teachers that taught at Lincoln went to. Mm-hmm. They were all students there. And so when they, were able to bring that world knowledge, I think that's what's missing also in our educational system is the world view of yourself and how you fit into the world. Because schools spend so much time teaching to the little small finite part of education without exposing you to the big picture of what this all represents and how it all fits in, where its origins. We didn't get that either. But the fact is that I was around people who challenged me, my parents especially, question them. Yeah. My dad in the 3rd grade made me cry. I said, Dad, Abraham Lincoln freed this. I said, son, I'm going to tell you some stuff. Abraham Lincoln did not free the slaves. Abraham Lincoln didn't even like black people. Abraham Lincoln was not your friend. He was basically talking, no, Dave, Abraham Lincoln, Daddy. My dad was, I would say, ahead of his time because he challenged me to question a lot of stuff. This was when the Francis Gary Powers thing was going on, back to YouTube thing, and I was like, how the United States was infallible, you couldn't lie. This is America, Daddy. And he said, no. I'm going to show you some lies right now. This whole thing, this YouTube thing down here, he explained that to me. I'll never forget that kind of stuff. And then the fact that he questioned, the integrity of Abraham Lincoln, which you don't do that, right? And he did. And I to this day, saw a different side of Abraham Lincoln that I probably never would have if I accepted the textbook version. Yeah. And I think that was what opened my brain up to, the world and I think if you travel, you leave the country, you leave where you are and come back and look at it, you see it in different eyes. Yeah. Springfield doesn't look the same if you leave Springfield and come back to see Springfield. Yeah. And that was another thing I think that I was able to travel a little bit as a kid, St. Louis and Kansas City. But I know kids that didn't get a chance to go across town. So, that for me was a big eye opener. And the fact is that, as my age is getting up there, I'm starting to find out that what I take for granted that I know, a lot of people don't have a clue. And, I'm thinking, maybe I should share more of my knowledge with a lot of these people. I've got cousins and family down there trying to get me to come down there to kind of give them a story on Black history of Springfield. And what I really want to tell them is not so much about what I know about Springfield history, it's about what they need to do to document it. They need to go to their grandmother and who are the oldest people they know in the city or in their family, and document that.
Yeah.
Get that story on paper.
We need to get it on, like we're getting this on tape. So, I think
that's what these kids need to do with their grandparents. Yeah. And something I did later in life that I wish I had done earlier. Yeah. When my grandparents were fresh. But how many 16-year-old kids are going to go ask their grandparents those kind of questions? It wasn't like, but the curiosity enough was there, and I guess because I was always around them, I heard their stories, and the names stuck. I made my mother, before she passed, I would write down all the connections you can from both sides: your mom, your dad, my mother, his mother. And I was able to put together about a 75-page document on my family history from Springfield, northern Arkansas, and how it fits in from both sides of the family, both sides of the tree. And I've got that ready. I'm ready to publish it soon. I don't know. I probably need to clean it up.
Let me know when it's published, because we'll definitely are interested in getting a copy.
Yeah, it needs to be cleaned up. I mean, I've been compiling. I've got birth certificates, death certificates. I've got pictures, stories. Just a ton of stuff that needs to be cleaned up. I've been compiling for like 20 years, and I collected it, and of course, being a part of the Ancestry.com, which I joined about 5 years ago, has opened up a lot of little connections of family that I didn't know existed. So yeah, I put it together, and I need to probably find a publisher, somebody who's, probably need to find an editor, somebody who can go through it and say, hey man, that stuff don't make sense. What do you got here? And formatting from a Word document to actually a published thing is something I had to go through also.
Well, I'm not on their editorial board or anything, but there's a small press down in Springfield, Moon City Press, that might be interested.
Moon City Press?
Moon City Press.
I'll give them a call.
Yeah. And if you want to go the self-publishing route, that's an option these days too.
I probably need a better
If your goal is
computer.
not to make as much money as you possibly can, but you just want to get the record out there, get it published, and get it in some libraries. And
what I've done so far is provide copies of family members of what I've, and as it grows, it's like, I've updated this. This is not relevant anymore. I've had to keep track of that too. There's been 4 or 5 iterations since I started.
Well, I may hound you to get a copy of your manuscript. Just if you'd be willing to donate to the university archives.
Okay. Yeah.
We'd be interested in having it. So.
Yeah. It's.
So we're interested in we're interested in all the whole history. With the white, the black history.
Yeah,
the
understood.
Native American.
Well, like I said, when I talk about black history, Springfield, I'm also talking about white history. Springfield. When I talk about my slave, when I found out about my slave ancestors, I found out about it by studying the probate records of the slave owner. They kept great records. They had to pay taxes on all those slaves. So the county, Greene County, kept really good records of all the. He had 6 horses at $50 each. He had 10 cows. He had 12 slaves, and they had their first names. And I was able to get all that stuff out there. And as I said, the Greene County Archives over on Boonville Street is a wonderful place. That is a wellspring of information. And I've used their stuff a lot, as well as, of course, the internet. And, before the internet, I was just kind of cross-referencing stuff that my grandma told me about. Going out there trying to find out that. And then now it all makes sense, And the lost family members, the ones I had heard about, the 3 little slave girls, I've got them down to 2 now. I got their names. I know who they were. This is my great-great-grandmother's sister. There was 3 of them. They were sold into slavery from their mother, taken, sold to a settler who ended up in Springfield. This is 1840s, maybe 1850s. And the little girls all knew they were sisters. The mother was sick because she took all 3 of the little girls. The oldest one was probably 13. One was about 6. One was 3 or 4. And they were raised out east of Springfield, out by Stratford. The Danforths had a bunch of slaves. And each of the girls were given to one of the families, family members, when they got married. This one got married, she became an heiress. This one got married, she became a Sawyer. And there were those girls, I was able to track all that down using the slave schedules and stuff. And those are 2 that I got. There's a 3rd one I still haven't found her name. I don't know what her name was. But I'm still looking for her. I just found this other one about a month ago. So, as you dig in, you keep digging, you say, wow, I found something I've been looking for 10 years. I finally found it. Wow, right there. So it's a puzzle, figuring out your own past. But like I said, the more I study my own family, the more I understand Springfield. I see, I've got copies of all the police reports of Springfield from when they first put a police department together. And I was able to go in and highlight all the African American issues that the police department had. From about 1850 something, when they first put together the police department in Springfield, it was because the slave population was larger than the general population of the city.
Hmm.
There were, 2,000 whites with probably 3,000 slaves. And the charter was, or the patrol was to keep the slave population in check. Because they were starting to terrorize the white people. There's too many of them. They get unruly. They're making too much noise over there in the
They had the
conversation.
numbers, yeah.
So they created these rules about being caught after dark. Whites would be arrested, blacks would be arrested and soundly beaten. And I mean, those are public Springfield, Missouri rules. Those are police law. That's the charter of the police department. And I read all that stuff too, and I was be able to see how my family feel. Wow, I wonder what they had to go through with that. Lord, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was something I was able to glean on over the years.
So Springfield was even, my understanding is a true sunset town was, if you're black, you are not welcome in this town come sunset.
Well, you can be here after sunset. You can't be here after sunset.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say Springfield was I think parts of Springfield were that way. You got to understand that blacks even in my dad's age, and even when I was coming up, there were places in Springfield, if you were caught at a certain hour, you plan on getting stopped. You might not go to jail, but you can plan on getting stopped and searched. Even today. There's an unwritten rule out there called racial profiling, but there's a precedence for it, and it's been going on for a long, long time. Towns like Springfield have covenants, little secret laws that housing authorities have about who they can rent to and about certain rules and things. They're still in effect. They just don't talk about it. But I mean, Springfield, the history of Springfield it centers around that university too.
Yeah.
I don't think that university can absolve itself from some of the horrible things that it has turned its back on in the community. The fact is that there's been never ever any recruitment from the university to the black community. When I was coming up, counselors in school wouldn't talk about college to us. Black kids never heard about college. They told a friend of mine, she's a straight A student. They told her her best job would be go get a job as a nurse. College isn't for everybody. So we grew up with that. Kind of education being pushed on us as a secondary thing. You don't need this. You can do this. Black people don't need that. But our parents were like, no, you're going to college. You're going to school. You're going to figure it out. Right. So Springfield has spent a lot of time purposely ignoring black families. When the university would put on programs, Black History Month programs, they bring in a speaker from Birmingham, Alabama, to talk about integration. People in Springfield did not want to hear that. But what they did want to hear was the local perspective. 1980, Dr. Holt Spicer commissioned me to come in and put together Black History Month for the university. Okay, I'll do this. I charge them a fee, and it was using local talent. Put an art exhibit together. I did 4 nights of local music, used the university. We featured one night a community gospel, one night we had jazz, one night we had African dance. I was trying to highlight various parts of the African culture using local people, as well as food from the various restaurants. I got all the food donated, and we had samples of Creole food or Cajun food, or we had samples of soul food. We had samples of we had African students prepare dishes. And we were averaging 400 or 500 people a night in the theater, as well as over Central High School where we had a fashion show. The thing I noticed most was that the people in Springfield did not feel like they were part of the college. They didn't feel welcome out there. They go out there, oh, ain't nothing out there for us. Ain't no people I know out there. And that was never broken down by the school. The school either didn't see it or saw it and encouraged it. I don't know. Yeah. But for the most part, Springfield blacks have never been a part of that university. Have never even felt a part of that university. My daughter, she wanted to go to school down there, and so her mother graduated from there and whatnot. But I think the university has a huge responsibility to bridge that gap. Yeah. And the fact is that schools taken out, removed the arts. Schools don't have, public schools now don't even offer music classes.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, who's going to take up the slack? Universities should. Let the students who are learning how to play music in the orchestra or the band, charter them with one part of their class or their learning is to go back into the school system and tutor. Mm-hmm. The university has instruments. I'm sure they got more instruments than they use. Mm-hmm. Make that available.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure who is overseeing any of this, but my idea is that until you ask people to do stuff, they may not volunteer.
Right.
They may not see a need.
Right. We're all busy.
Yeah. I understand that.
That's a good point. And the history, I haven't seen it yet, but the History Museum on the Square just opened an exhibit. It's like We've Always Been Here, I think is the name of it.
Yeah. My mother's, she's got a couple of things on her in there. They were asking me to get a picture of one of my great uncles who was a icon in Springfield back in the 50s. John Sellers, I've talked to him quite a bit. I've given him a couple of things to put on display.
Yeah, I need to get over there and see that.
Yeah, I'm going to go down probably in the next week or two and see it. My daughter went to see it. She said it was so big that they did not have enough room to display it all.
Yeah.
They had a lot of pictures that they just didn't have room to put out.
Yeah.
So it's just
that's a good problem to have,
Yeah, that's really most museums have a backlog of stuff that they can rotate.
Yeah, you usually see like about 1/10 of what most museums have. Yeah. So
and I'm glad that Missouri State has finally gotten some traction with Catherine Lederer's stuff.
Yeah,
because back when I first started working with Catherine back in 1990 or so. I had plans to put together, in fact, I got a 401c3 for the Walter Majors Institute. We were going to take all the local archives of Springfield, Missouri, and Greene County, compliments of Catherine. She agreed to do it, She said, oh, that's a great idea. That was before SMS came involved with Missouri State. And we had pretty much gotten to the point where all we need to do now is raise money. And we were a legal organization, 501c3. Problem was, I was in Kansas City, and I couldn't raise enough money from here. I couldn't get in touch with any real money because Kansas City money is not interested in projects in Springfield.
Right.
So I had to go to Springfield quite a bit. And the real problem became when I realized that I'm going to have to move to Springfield in order to make this thing happen.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time collecting information about it, put the whole Walter Major story together. Glad I did. I still got it. I'm ready. I'm actually ready to do a documentary on Walter Majors. Yeah. I've got enough to put out an educational, maybe 15-minute documentary. I'm ready for that.
Yeah, we should talk about that. One thing that's come down the pike here that I'm still trying to figure out what it's good for is we can do crowdfunding now online.
What does that mean?
That's where you say, okay, we want to do the Walter Majors Institute or something. And people can go online, and you have a little video about, his life and what this institute's going to be about. And then you just give them give $15, give $25 and we'll send you a t-shirt. And you give, $100 and we'll send you a personalized thank you note or something. So people can just give whatever they want to give. Wow. But the power is you get enough people that say, well, yeah, this is a worthy project, and I'll give $25.
The thing is, it was at the time that this all came to being, I was really concerned about the wrong people trying to interpret Black history of Springfield. And nothing against Catherine. I'm glad she did what she did, because if she didn't do it, nobody else would have done it.
Yeah.
But Catherine and I ran into a few things against each other, arguments that, she got pissed off at me. I said, Catherine, I love what you did with that plaque on the square. That's a great idea. I'm glad you did it. And they put graves up for the dead men, the men that were lynched. You got grave markers for them. I said, but why didn't you say they were innocent? What do you mean? I said, one of them was up there for murder. I said, Catherine, they were innocent men. And you just put on the square that these 4 men were lynched on this spot, but you did not say they were innocent men. And the grand jury, I don't know if it ever exonerated them, but they should be posthumously exonerated because none of those men were guilty of anything. They had never been convicted of a crime. And definitely the two men that were accused of the rape, absolutely no connection to it. Absolutely. The woman wasn't raped anyway. We know that now. That was one of the biggest arguments I ever got with Catherine, because I said history is going to tell this story, Catherine, and we want history to be right. We want history to say that these were innocent men that were lynched on that square, not men who were lynched. Because you could have been lynched, and right, you were a dirty old bastard. You got lynched. And that happened. A lot of guilty people were lynched in the Ozarks. A lot of innocent men were lynched too. And now that was one of the few arguments I had with her about it. And I think that's what it came down to. If we're going to have our black history told, we need to interpret our own history. We need to be able to be the ones, based on research and affiliation with the situation, to be able to tell the story in the correct way. Now, I could be way off on base on that, but that was my point at that time. That black people need to take ownership of their own community and their own history, and the only way to do that is own it. And
you got to capture that knowledge before people pass away. Too,
They're passing every day. Zelma Graham, she was 106 when she died. I talked to her up to about a week before she died. I used to talk to Ms. Graham at least once a month. I talked to Elaine about once a month. And the thing that I remember about all those ladies and all the women in that age group, their knowledge of potential, they saw the best in everybody. They never saw negative things about people. They always saw, your mother was one of the best kids I had. I thought she should have gone to college. She was one of the smartest kids I had. And she's talking to me about my mother, She was my mother's first grade teacher, And those people are gone, And the same lady said, well, I was just a little girl, but I remember your great-grandmother. Was her name Alice? I said, yeah, that was Alice. That's my great-grandmother. So when you talk to people who can give you that perspective, that's like burning down the town library. When you leave those people out, it's like, hey man, we lost everything. We can't get that back. Those people are gone. So that's for me was what was also kind of accelerated my interest in preserving my own family's history, because I'm an only child. I don't have any brothers and sisters to pass it on, but got a lot of cousins and my own children, in fact. In fact, my daughter, I just gave her access to a lot of my stuff, and she's using it to help her do some stuff. But I don't know. I don't know who's interested in my own personal viewpoints of history, because I never really, asked anybody about it. I just say,
I'll tell you that it's better to save it and get it out there than to say, oh, nobody's interested in this. Somebody's going to be interested. You think that nobody'll be interested. They will be. And they are now, but you just got to find. That's the great thing about the internet.
We have Black History Month every year. Everybody gets really interested. Then for like 8 and 10 months later, But there are a group. I'm aware of a small group of blacks in Springfield who are trying to get together at least quarterly to discuss life in the black neighborhoods before they got melted into the big pot. They're still meeting. I think Denny Wayne's in that group. What's his name? Mark Dixon.
We interviewed Denny Wayne. Somebody else.
He's got. He's sharp. He's had horrible health problems. But then he's still he's on top of it. Sure.
And Samuel Knox, he's one of our interviewers actually. So.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he's doing some.
Okay.
Just I guess.
Yeah, I mean the idea that people who are from Springfield are subject matter experts is not true. There are a lot of people born and raised in Springfield who don't have a clue. I'm sure there's a gang of them. And I don't know. For me, it was just always a lot of fun hearing and seeing how things how they work. When I was a kid in Springfield, we still had horse-drawn merchants. That was a thing in the summertime. A guy would come up, it would be Jefferson, from the tracks of Water Street down there, or down with Fabler's down there. And he would load up his wagon, had a big umbrella, and he'd have bananas and fruits and green beans and tomatoes. And he had just one little horse. And to this day, I don't remember if the horse was Bob or Walt. I know one was Bob and one was Walter. I can't remember if it was the horse or the guy. But the horse is a very classical horse with the hat and his ear sticking out through it. And, kids would all come by and he'd always have a banana or something for you, That was all in the 50s in Springfield, Missouri. A lot of people, I don't think to this day ever can, remember that. Cause, I just had to be around.
You mentioned, the curbs on Highway 13. I mean, I grew up in Iowa, but we know what we're talking about.
Scary highways,
but,
man. You hit that curb.
Yeah, and then they just swing you back in the other lane.
And the worst part,
and if it rained, you'd have like 6 inches of water going right down the middle of the road.
And back then, when I first learned how to drive a car, cars were as big as pickup trucks.
Yeah,
they were big old buses going down the road, man. And seemed like on 13. You never saw a curve until there was a bridge. They put the curves on them. Oh no, it's the scariest thing in the world. And speed limit was 70.
Yeah.
You fly down them roads, and cars back then could get up and go. They had a horsepower.
I had V8 and a big boat.
Oh yeah, you float down the road.
You'd get on that curve and
a lot of pitch and yaw, as they say. That 13 highway until I don't know, back in the 80s, they finally widened it.
They figured it out.
Well, they ended up putting passing lanes on it. Yeah. They didn't go 4 lanes. They put a passing on the hill. They put a passing so you could go around the slow guy. Yeah. You just came up there. Didn't you just drive up 13?
Yeah.
Great highway.
4 lane now.
Yeah, but years ago it was people would always take 71 to 44.
Yeah.
That was the accepted way to take that route.
Faster.
Yeah.
Safer. Well, Harold, thanks very much.
Tom, it's
been good.
Good to talk to you.